I didn't know a marriage could die without a body. No bruises, no lipstick on a collar, no hotel receipts tucked into a wallet. Just a slow, steady drip of suspicion, fed to my husband by the two women he trusted more than anyone, his mother and his sister. And the worst part? For most of our marriage, they didn't need proof. They only needed time. It started with something so stupid it almost feels like a joke now, except it wasn't funny when it detonated my life. A pair of men's black boxer briefs. Medium. I remember the exact moment Benny held them up like they were evidence in a trial. His fingers pinched the waistband, his face tight and pale, eyes shining with the kind of certainty that scares you more than anger. "Anything you need to tell me?" he asked. My throat went dry. Tell you what? He didn't yell. He didn't swear. He didn't throw the underwear at me like a movie villain. He just stared at me like I'd been a stranger sleeping in his bed for 12 years. And when I tried to explain, when I tried to say I shared an Airbnb with my CEO, I did laundry, I was sick, I must have grabbed the wrong thing from the dryer. He cut me off so fast it felt like he'd rehearsed it. "I knew it," he whispered. "They were right." "They?" I repeated, like an idiot, like my brain couldn't catch up. And that's when Benny finally said it out loud. His mom, Pearl, and his sister Jen had been telling him for years that I was cheating whenever I traveled for work. Years. Not a new fear, not a sudden insecurity. A belief he'd been carrying quietly, while I worked, while I paid the bills, while he stayed home raising our girls, while I moved our whole family to Somerville so he could be closer to them. I remember sitting on that couch, my heart thumping too hard, realizing the truth wasn't the underwear. The underwear was just the match. The gas leak had been there the whole time. And once you understand that, you start seeing every small moment in your marriage like it was part of a long con. Because if Benny had been searching my phone for proof, how long had he been searching my face for guilt? I'm 40 now, and if you saw my life on paper, you'd probably assume I'm one of those women who has everything handled. 2 daughters, a stable career, a husband who stayed home to raise the kids, a house in a decent neighborhood, a schedule that runs like a machine. But paper doesn't show you what it costs to keep a machine running. Paper doesn't show you the tiny choices you make every day, where you swallow your frustration, where you keep your voice calm, where you tell yourself, "It's fine, we're fine, this is normal." Brittany is 17, my first baby from a relationship I barely talk about anymore because it belongs to a version of me that didn't know how to demand better. I was young, stubborn, determined to prove I could build a life without anyone's permission. Robin is 13, our shared daughter. The one Benny carried on his shoulders at the zoo. The one who used to fall asleep with her head on his chest while he watched cartoons with her. The one who still calls him Dad in that soft voice that makes him melt. Benny is 43 now. We've been together 14 years, married for 12. When we first got together, he was warm in a way that felt like shelter. Not flashy, not performative, just steady. He laughed easily. He listened. He remembered small things, how I took my coffee, what song made me cry, how I hated crowded restaurants. He'd bring me dinner when I worked late and act like it was nothing. And the depression, I knew it was there early. He told me about it the way someone tells you they've had a bad back their whole life, like it was just part of him, like you didn't need to make a big deal out of it. Back then, he had a therapist. Then he quit after a bad experience and insisted he was okay, and I, like an optimist, like a wife, like a woman who wanted to believe love could handle things, let myself accept his version of okay. When Robin was about a year old, we made the decision that seemed logical. Benny would stay home. Daycare was brutally expensive. I was already climbing in my career. Project management at a tech company where I'd been grinding for 2 decades. My income was stable, growing. His job was fine, but not something he loved. He was good with kids, better than good, patient in the ways I wasn't when I came home exhausted. So we did the math. We talked, we planned, and Benny chose to be a stay-at-home dad. Over the years, he became the center of the house in a quiet way. He knew the girls' school schedules better than I did. He handled permission slips, lunches, field trip forms. He cooked most nights. He kept the household moving like a well-run ship. And I worked. Not just worked, built. My career took off. The way careers do when you're reliable, boring in the best way, and you never miss a deadline. The money got better. The titles got fancier. The travel, once frequent, started to taper as I moved up. 3 years ago, I made what I thought was the most loving decision I could make for our marriage. We relocated to Somerville, Benny's hometown, where his mother, Pearl, lived, where his younger sister, Jen, lived, where he'd always said he wanted to be closer to family. I didn't have anyone pulling me back. My dad died in 2019. My connection to my mom's side had always been thin and messy, like a rope fraying one thread at a time. So when Benny said, "I miss them," I didn't argue. I thought maybe this will be good for him, for us, for the girls. Pearl welcomed us at first. Casseroles, offers to babysit, that bright, sweet voice that makes you feel like you're being hugged. Jen came by for dinner sometimes. She was around mid-30s, casually confident, the kind of woman who talks like she's just curious when she's actually taking notes. I honestly believed we were building something solid. And because I've never been a social person, I didn't question how eager they were to be involved. I told myself it was normal. When I traveled for work, now only 2 or 3 times a year, I was transparent to a fault. My location was always on. Benny got my Lyft notifications automatically. We FaceTimed every night. Me, him, the girls, like a ritual. I thought transparency was armor. I didn't know you can be perfectly honest and still get convicted in someone else's courtroom. Looking back, I can see the shift now. At the time, it felt so subtle I almost missed it, like a draft in a room you've lived in forever. You notice it, but you assume a window's cracked somewhere. You don't assume the foundation is moving. It started around the same time Benny decided to try therapy again. I remember feeling relieved when he told me, hopeful even. He said he'd found someone new, someone he felt comfortable with. I told him, like I always had, that if he ever needed me to cancel a trip or come home early, I would. My company was flexible. My priorities were clear. He smiled and said, "I'm fine, really." But fine started to look different. I noticed him leaning in when I texted. Not obviously. Not in a way you could call out without sounding paranoid yourself. Just a little closer than usual. A glance that lingered too long. A pause when my phone lit up. One night I caught him watching my laptop screen while I was answering emails. I didn't snap. I didn't hide anything. I just said, "You know you can have my passcodes, right?" He froze. I laughed softly, trying to make it light. "Seriously, my phone, my laptop, it's all the same code. I'll write it down if you want." His face flushed, like I'd embarrassed him. He waved it off, said he was being silly, that he didn't need it. So I dropped it. That's the thing about trust. You don't protect it by interrogating every crack. You protect it by believing the person standing in front of you. Or at least I thought you did. Then October came. A 5-day work trip. One of the rare longer ones. A conference my CEO, Sarah, was attending too. We decided to share an Airbnb instead of booking 2 hotel rooms. We'd worked together for over 20 years. She was my boss, yes, but also the closest thing I had to a work friend. Practical. No nonsense. The Airbnb was cheaper, had a kitchen. It belonged to 4 guys who traveled a lot for their jobs and rented it out when they were gone. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't exciting. It was functional. By day 3, I started feeling run down. By day 5, I was sick. Fever, body aches, that hollowed-out exhaustion where everything feels heavy. I just wanted to get home. I did laundry before I left, threw everything in the dryer, packed fast, didn't double-check. I wasn't thinking clearly. When I got home, I went straight to bed. Benny unpacked my suitcase for me. I remember thanking him weekly before falling asleep again. I was out of commission for a week after that. Then weeks passed. Nothing felt wrong. No fights, no tension. Life moved forward. Christmas came. We kept it just the 4 of us. Benny didn't argue when I said I wanted it that way. The girls laughed. We cooked too much food. For a moment, it felt like maybe we'd turned a corner. But February brought another short trip, less than 24 hours, in and out. And when I came back, the watching started again. He'd sit beside me on the couch and watch me unlock my phone. He'd ask who I was texting. I'd answer honestly, coworker, teacher, client, and offer, again, to let him read the messages. "No," he'd say quickly, "I trust you." But trust doesn't hover. Trust doesn't track your eyes. In March, he crossed a line he couldn't uncross. I was working at the kitchen table when he sat down beside me and asked me to scroll up in a team chat so he could see who everyone was. 12 people, 10 women, 2 men in their 60s, married. He seemed satisfied. I wasn't. When I asked him what was going on, he said he was just curious. I didn't argue. I just closed my laptop and moved to the bedroom. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. Because curiosity doesn't feel like surveillance. And promises to do better don't mean much when the pattern keeps looping. I just didn't know yet what had been feeding that pattern all along. The night everything finally broke didn't feel dramatic at first. It was ordinary in the way most disasters are. Dinner half cooked, Robin at the table with her homework spread out like a battlefield, Brittany upstairs with her headphones on, music leaking faintly through the floor. I was in the kitchen, stirring sauce, when my phone buzzed in the living room. Once. Then again. Then a third time in quick succession. I didn't think much of it. Benny was upstairs with Robin, helping her with math. I heard their voices, his calm, patient tone, hers frustrated but trusting. The sound of a family doing something normal. A minute later, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I assumed he was grabbing a glass of water. When I walked into the living room a few minutes later to check my phone, the air felt wrong. Benny was standing near the couch, my phone in his hand. Not sitting. Standing. His shoulders were tense, his grip too tight. The screen was lit. His hand was shaking. For a second, I just stared at him, confused. Then I saw the name at the top of the screen. Mark. 6 messages. The first 4 were photos. An old metal toolbox, scratched and dented, the clasp slightly bent. I recognized it instantly. My dad's toolbox. The one he'd carried to job sites for years. The one that still smelled faintly like oil and sawdust when you opened it. The last 2 messages were simple. Found this while cleaning my garage. Thought you might want it. I can meet you halfway if you'd like. It's been a while. Mark was an old friend of my father's. They'd worked together for decades. After my dad died in 2019, Mark had helped me sort through some of his things. Every now and then, he'd reach out when he found something that belonged to my dad. A notebook, a photo, a memory. I stepped forward and took the phone from Benny's hand. He didn't resist. He stepped back instead, and then collapsed onto the couch like his legs had given out. Within seconds, he was hyperventilating. Fast, shallow breaths, hands clenched into fists, tears streaming down his face, unchecked and frightening. His chest hitched like it couldn't remember how to breathe properly. A full panic attack. I sat beside him, close but not touching, grounding myself so I could ground him. I counted his breaths, waited, let the wave pass. It took 10 minutes before he could speak again. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were wild with fear. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you." Something in my chest cracked open. Not relief, not forgiveness, exhaustion. I asked him how long he'd believed I was cheating. He didn't dodge it this time. "Most of our marriage," he admitted quietly. The words landed like a physical blow. That's when everything poured out. Years of whispered doubts, planted by Pearl first, then reinforced by Jen. Comments about my travel, about money, about how no woman in my position could stay faithful for 20 years. Even something his first therapist had said once, that statistically, it was unlikely I'd never cheated. When he found the underwear, the stupid, accidental, meaningless underwear, it felt like confirmation. He'd been watching me, tracking me, waiting for proof. And when he couldn't find it, he'd panicked harder. I handed him my phone again, then my laptop. "Look," I said, "everything. Messages, emails, photos. I have nothing to hide." He spent 2 hours combing through my life. 2 hours while I sat in the kitchen, staring at the wall, wondering how love could survive being put on trial for 12 years. When he came back, he was sobbing. "I was wrong," he said. "They were wrong, I know that now." I asked him why he'd never told me. Why he'd let me live in a marriage where I was quietly suspected of being a liar. He didn't have an answer. I suggested we see someone together, a counselor, a neutral third party. He shook his head. "We don't need that. I promise I'll do better." And I wanted so badly to believe him. So I did. But some promises are already broken the moment they're spoken. Because trust isn't something you rebuild by pretending the foundation was never poisoned. For a little while after that night, I let myself hope. Not the naive, fairy tale kind of hope, but the cautious, bruised version that tells you maybe this can still be repaired if we're careful. Benny seemed calmer, lighter. He laughed more easily again. He stopped hovering when I checked my phone. He didn't flinch when I said I had a call or an email to answer. We made it through Christmas with just the 4 of us. No Pearl, no Jen. He didn't argue. He didn't guilt me. The girls were happy, and that felt like a small miracle. I told myself that sometimes people need to see the edge before they step back. But trust, once cracked, doesn't shatter loudly. It creaks. In February, I had to travel again. Barely a trip at all. Tuesday morning to Wednesday afternoon. One in-person meeting I couldn't avoid. When I got home, everything looked normal. And then slowly, the old behaviors started slipping back in. He watched my phone unlock again, asked who I was texting, accepted my answers with a quick nod, but his eyes lingered, scanning my face for something I wasn't giving him. Each time I offered him my phone, he refused. "I trust you," he'd say. But trust doesn't ask the same question twice. By March, the tension had crept into the small moments. One afternoon, I was working at the kitchen table when Benny sat down beside me. He leaned in and started reading my team chat over my shoulder. "Scroll up," he said. I did. He wanted names, roles, ages, relationships. 10 women, 2 men, both married, both old enough to be my father. He nodded, satisfied. I wasn't. I closed my laptop and asked him what was really going on. He said he was just curious. I didn't fight him, I didn't cry, I just moved my work into the bedroom and shut the door. That night, lying beside him, staring at the ceiling, I asked myself a question I'd never let myself consider before. How long am I supposed to live like I'm on probation for a crime I didn't commit? The answer came a week later. I was cooking dinner again. The phone buzzed. Benny went to check it, and when I walked into the living room, I saw him shaking, already halfway to panic. Mark's messages. My dad's toolbox. A memory, not a secret. And still, Benny's body reacted like he'd caught me in the act. I waited for his breathing to slow. I waited for the tears to stop. Then I said the words that had been building in my chest for months. I can't do this anymore. He begged, promised therapy, promised boundaries, promised to cut off his mom and sister. I told him I'd heard that before. He went upstairs and started yelling on the phone. I didn't hear everything, just my name, repeated over and over. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded. Pearl, Jen, calls, texts. I didn't answer. The messages turned vicious fast. This is who you really are. You've always been controlling. You trapped him. That word made my hands go cold. Trapped. As if Benny hadn't chosen this life. As if we hadn't decided everything together. As if love could be rewritten as imprisonment just because it didn't fit someone else's fantasy. I sat on the couch reading those messages when Brittany came downstairs. She didn't ask questions at first. She just looked at my face and knew. When I showed her a few of the texts, only the mild ones, she didn't hesitate. She blocked both numbers. Then she said something that landed harder than anything Pearl or Jen ever wrote. They've always been weird about you, she said. I'm glad you're finally seeing it. That was the moment I stopped blaming myself. Because my daughter, who had no reason to protect my ego, had seen what I'd been rationalizing away. And once your child names the truth out loud, you can't unhear it. Once the truth cracked open, everything rushed out at once. There was no gentle unraveling, no clean separation between past and present, just years of manipulation spilling into the light, dragging every small moment along with it like evidence finally pulled from storage. When Benny came back downstairs that night, his face was red, eyes glassy. Brittany was still sitting beside me, her arms crossed, not defiant, just solid, grounded. He asked if we could talk alone. Brittany answered before I could. No, she said calmly. Whatever you're going to say, you can say in front of me. I'd never heard her take that tone with him. It wasn't disrespectful. It was protective. Benny looked at me, searching for support. I didn't give it. He tried again. Said his mom and sister were just scared of losing him, that they loved him, that they didn't want him hurt. I asked him a simple question. Do you understand that they've been wrong about me for over a decade? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. I reminded him of what I'd done for this marriage. Not in a bitter way, just fact. I moved us to Somerville, left the city where my career was rooted, where my life had been stable. I built a home near his family when I had none of my own to fall back on. I welcomed Pearl and Jen into our house. Holidays, dinners, birthdays, all while they quietly dismantled his trust in me. Benny didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just said, they're still my family. I swallowed hard. I've been your family for 14 years. That ended the conversation. A week later, Benny moved out. He went straight to Pearl's house. I told myself it was temporary. That space might help him think clearly. But clarity doesn't grow in the same soil that poisoned you. The girls stayed with me during the week. Weekends with him. Brittany refused to go to Pearl's house. Benny didn't fight it. He took the girls out instead. Mall trips, movies, neutral ground. Robin asked me one night why her dad left. I kept it simple, age-appropriate, gentle. Sometimes adults have trouble trusting each other, I said. And when that happens, it's hard to stay together. She asked if it was her fault. I felt my chest tighten. No, I said immediately. This has nothing to do with you or your sister. She nodded, but she grew quieter after that. Brittany, on the other hand, grew sharper, more aware. She started helping around the house without being asked, folding laundry, cooking, watching me the way children do when they're afraid their parent might break. The financial mess came next. Benny still had access to our joint accounts. He was withdrawing money for his expenses. I didn't stop him, not at first. But fear does something to you when it's earned. I opened a separate account and moved most of my paycheck there. I left enough in the joint account to cover reasonable expenses and the girls' needs. When Benny noticed, he exploded. Texted me that I was proving his family right, that I'd been hiding money all along. I didn't respond. Instead, I called a lawyer. Filing for divorce felt like stepping off a ledge I'd been standing on for years. I didn't want to, but I also couldn't live waiting for the next accusation, the next panic attack, the next time someone convinced my husband I was dangerous. When Benny got the paperwork, he called me crying. He asked if we could talk before making it official. I told him we'd been talking for months. He said he'd cut off his mom and sister. I asked him how that worked when he was sleeping under his mother's roof. That's when he said something that finally explained everything. He asked if I'd ever wondered why his family hated me so much. I said I assumed they thought I wasn't good enough. He laughed, not kindly. They wanted me to marry someone else, he said. A woman named Nicole, from Somerville, from a family Pearl adored, the one who came before me. Pearl had never let it go. She'd kept in touch with Nicole, invited her to events I wasn't at, suggested coffee when I traveled. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted him back where she'd planned. And Jen followed her lead. 14 years of quiet sabotage. I asked why he never told me. He said he didn't think it mattered. He chose me. But choice without protection isn't loyalty. In the weeks that followed, memories rearranged themselves in my mind. Pearl's comments about my work, my travel, how I was never home enough. Jen's innocent questions, who I talked to, who I worked with, whether I made friends easily. I'd answered honestly. I didn't know I was feeding a narrative. When Brittany found me looking at old photos, Pearl smiling beside me, Jen with her arm around my shoulder, she said something simple. Some people are just good at pretending. I wish that had been enough to erase the guilt. It wasn't, but it was enough to help me stand. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And that's when the marriage truly ended. Not with a signature, but with understanding. The lowest point didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came on a quiet afternoon, weeks after Benny moved out, when the house was too still and my thoughts had nowhere to hide. The girls were at school. The dishwasher hummed softly. Sunlight cut across the living room floor in neat, indifferent lines. I sat on the couch and realized I was afraid of my own phone. Not because I was hiding anything, but because every buzz made my chest tighten, waiting for another accusation, another demand, another reminder that my integrity had been up for debate for over a decade. That's when the weight of it all finally settled in. I hadn't just lost a husband. I'd lost the illusion that love alone could protect you from being misrepresented by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. I replayed moments I'd dismissed for years. The way Pearl's smile never quite reached her eyes when I talked about work. The way Jen would tilt her head, listening too closely, like she was cataloging my answers. The times Benny went quiet after spending time with them. I blamed myself for not seeing it sooner, for thinking transparency would be enough, for believing that being reasonable would keep me safe. One night, Robin asked if we were still a family. I told her yes, because we were, just a different version. She accepted that, but later I heard her crying softly in her room. Brittany stood in the hallway listening, her jaw tight. I hate them, she said quietly. I didn't correct her, because for the first time, I didn't feel the need to protect people who had never protected me. The divorce process dragged on in a strange, hollow way. Benny didn't fight it. He agreed to the custody arrangement. The assets split. Everything. Part of me wondered if that was guilt or relief. Then Nicole called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity has a way of pulling you forward when you're tired of guessing. She asked to meet for coffee. She was calm, direct, not defensive. She told me Pearl had been telling her for years that Benny wasn't happy, that I was controlling, that I was unfaithful. Pearl had tried to set them up repeatedly, inviting Nicole to family events I wouldn't attend, suggesting casual meetings when I traveled. Nicole said she never went along with it. She was married now, had been for 8 years. She told me she came because she'd run into Brittany and realized my kids might think she'd been part of the betrayal. I hadn't even known Nicole's name until months ago. That conversation shattered something in me, because it meant the accusations weren't just internal. They were exported. Poison spreads. A coworker later made an offhand comment about my discipline staying faithful during travel. I laughed it off, but inside, something went cold. How far had this story traveled? The darkest moment came the night I packed. I found the box Mark had brought down, my dad's toolbox, his notebooks, a photo I'd never seen before of my father and Mark, young and smiling. I sat on the floor of my closet and cried in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before, not just for my marriage, but for how much of myself I'd spent proving a truth that should never have been questioned. I sealed the box and stood up. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel broken. I felt done. Done explaining. Done defending. Done waiting for someone else to believe me. That quiet resolve didn't fix everything. But it was the moment I stopped collapsing inward. And that mattered. The turning point didn't arrive as rage. It arrived as clarity. Not the kind that hits you like lightning, but the kind that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. It happened the afternoon the divorce was finalized. 2 weeks after Benny signed the papers without contesting a single thing. No arguments, no counterclaims, no sudden demands. Just signatures. I sat in my car afterward, hands resting on the steering wheel, waiting for some dramatic emotion to surface. Relief, grief, triumph. Instead, I felt steady. That scared me at first, until I realized steadiness wasn't numbness. It was self-respect finally standing up. That same week, Pearl and Jen tried to reach out to the girls on social media. Brittany blocked them instantly. Robin showed me the messages first. They apologized, claimed they'd made mistakes, said they hoped I could forgive them someday. I told Robin she could respond however she wanted. She blocked them too. I didn't celebrate that moment, but I recognized it for what it was. My daughters choosing safety over obligation. Benny tried to talk to me again after the papers were signed. Not about logistics. About us. He said he hadn't spoken to his mom or sister since moving out. I asked him if he really expected me to believe that while he was still living in Pearl's house. He admitted he was. He said it didn't matter anymore, and for the first time, I agreed. Because the truth had already done its work. Nicole's confirmation. Brittany's perspective. The patterns I couldn't unsee. They stitched together into something solid and undeniable. Benny hadn't cheated on me physically, but he'd let his family put me on trial for 14 years. He'd believed them more than he believed me, and that realization was worse than discovering an affair. A betrayal of trust doesn't require a bed. It requires consent to doubt. I transferred back to my old city. Somerville had never been mine. It was borrowed space, paid for with silence. Brittany was graduating soon. Robin was willing to move. We packed without ceremony. When I found my dad's box again, I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Some chapters don't require rereading. They require closing. The final moment of clarity came from someone unexpected. A coworker, someone who worked out of the Somerville office, mentioned she'd always wondered how I managed to stay faithful during my earlier travel-heavy years. The comment was casual, but I recognized it for what it was. Pearl's story had legs. It had walked farther than my marriage ever could. And suddenly, the choice became simple. I wasn't just leaving a husband. I was leaving a narrative that had never belonged to me. That night, I told Benny there was nothing left to discuss beyond the girls' schedules. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just sounded small. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for holding him up. Because love doesn't mean absorbing someone else's fear until it hollows you out. It means standing where you are without shrinking. That's what I finally did. The fallout didn't explode. It collapsed, quietly, inevitably, inward. Once the divorce was finalized, the illusion that Benny could stand between me and his family vanished. There was no buffer anymore, no shared holidays, no polite dinners, no unspoken rules about keeping the peace. And without me there to absorb the tension, everything turned back on him. Benny moved out of Pearl's house within a month. Robin mentioned it casually one weekend, said he'd been talking about finding his own place, that Grandma was stressed a lot. I didn't ask for details, but I didn't miss the significance either. When you remove the scapegoat, the system looks for another target. Pearl and Jen tried reaching out to Benny's friends, mutual acquaintances we'd known for years. People who'd smiled at me at barbecues, who'd asked about my job with curiosity that now felt loaded. The story didn't land the way they expected, because once the divorce paperwork made it clear there was no infidelity, no hidden accounts, no secret life, their version stopped making sense. Questions started coming back to Benny instead. Why had he believed it for so long? Why hadn't he gone to counseling? Why had he let his marriage unravel without ever confronting the source? Those questions don't feel kind when you don't have answers. Some of his friends pulled away, not dramatically. Just fewer calls, fewer invites, fewer assumptions of moral high ground. Family dinners at Pearl's house became tense. Robin told me Jen stopped coming around as much. I suspected she didn't enjoy being in a room where the narrative had cracked. Pearl reached out once, to me. A single email. She said she was sorry for how things had turned out. Not for what she'd done. Not for what she'd said. Just the outcome. I didn't respond, because apologies that avoid responsibility aren't apologies. They're attempts to reset the board without admitting the move. Benny tried once more to talk, not about reconciliation, but about regret. He said he finally understood how much damage his family had done. He said he wished he'd protected me. I told him I believed he meant that now. But meaning something too late doesn't undo its consequences. The girls settled into the new routine faster than I expected. Brittany thrived. She stopped watching me so closely, started planning her future again. College applications, late-night conversations about where she wanted to go, who she wanted to become. Robin took longer. She was quieter, thoughtful, asked careful questions. But she slept better. That mattered more than anything. As for me, I didn't feel victorious. I felt unburdened. No more checking my words. No more documenting my life like evidence. No more explaining why a museum visit was just a museum visit. I took a transfer back to my old city, sold the house, left Somerville behind without ceremony. When I drove away for the last time, I didn't look back. Because some places don't deserve nostalgia. Benny lost more than a marriage. He lost the comfort of certainty, the comfort of thinking someone else was the problem. And when that disappears, you're left with yourself. I don't know how he's doing now. I don't need to, because my story stopped being about him the moment I chose to leave. I used to believe that if you lived honestly, if you were transparent, loyal, patient, truth would protect you. I don't believe that anymore. Truth doesn't protect you. Boundaries do. I didn't lose my marriage because I traveled for work. I didn't lose it because of another man. I didn't lose it because I wasn't home enough. I lost it because this person who vowed to trust me allowed other people to rewrite who I was, quietly, persistently, for years. And because I stayed too long, thinking love meant enduring doubt. Today, my life is smaller in some ways. Fewer obligations, fewer explanations, fewer people with access to my inner world. But it's also lighter. My daughters see a woman who chooses herself without cruelty, who leaves without burning everything down, who refuses to be defined by accusations that never had proof. Brittany is nearly grown now. She knows what loyalty should look like. Robin is learning that love doesn't feel like walking on glass. As for me, I don't carry the need to convince anyone anymore. If someone believes lies about me, they can keep them. I know who I am. I know what I didn't do. And I know this. A marriage doesn't end the day someone files paperwork. It ends the day trust becomes conditional. If you're watching this and you feel like you're constantly defending your character to the person who's supposed to know you best, listen to that discomfort. Love shouldn't require a defense attorney. Sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do isn't to prove she's innocent. It's to walk away from a courtroom she never belonged in and move forward without looking back.